In ancient times, gods who called themselves the Osiris's descended to Earth. They gave humanity astronomy, architecture, and other great gifts, and demanded a high price for this. The pharaoh, together with the sun god Ra, confronted the threat. The aliens decided to call their king to Earth, which happened once every 5,000 years, when the stars line up in the right order. But the pharaoh stole the light from the Osirises and hid it in the labyrinth of his pyramid. There were those who believed in the mission of the aliens and prepared for their return. Among them was Princess Amanpour, who died giving birth to a child without the knowledge of the pharaoh. Gates were built under her tomb so that the descendants of the princess could meet the aliens. But the pharaoh created a key to the tomb so that no one could reveal the secret. At some point, the stars began their formation, but the key to the sky was lost, and the descendants of the princess disappeared. A young archaeologist named Duck Adler arrives at an excavation site in Egypt, where his leader, Professor Masterton, says that in 7 days the stars will line up in a certain order. He demands that the search for the pyramid be accelerated, not noticing that his cane has disappeared. Duck has already ordered searchlights so that people can work at night, but an approaching storm complicates everything. Masterton's partner, Professor Mendel, examines a plate found at the excavation site, where a symbol similar to a spaceship is engraved. At this time, the man who stole Masterton's cane hands it over to Peter Levitz, who arrives at the antiquities store to buy the key to the sky. The seller smirks because this is a very ancient and special artifact, but upon learning who is in front of him, he invites Levitz to come with him. He recalls the legend of the key that was lost in the mists of time and doubts the guest's solvency, but he shows the money. The seller opens the safe and shows the result of carbon testing of the item and hands Levitz the key. He doubles the amount, but the buyer offers to exchange it for a cane. The seller laughs at the joke, and Levitz attacks. The man takes the statue and leaves. After a while, Masterton arrives at the store. At this moment, Levitz calls him, blackmailing the professor into taking him into the deal. Otherwise, the murder weapon, the cane with Masterton's fingerprints, will be sent to the police. The professor goes to the seer Claire. When a sandstorm begins, Claire predicts that the professor will fulfill his destiny, but there will be fire raging around because the sign of Osiris has risen. The woman sees terrible premonitions, but does not tell Masterton about them. Then Professor Mendel calls. Masterton goes to the excavations and sees a pyramid cleared by a storm. The professor's assistant gathers a team for research because this pyramid is a space observatory, which will next appear to the world in 5,000 years, so he must be inside the pyramid. 3 days later, the workers work day and night while Professor Mendel deciphers the inscriptions on the walls. But Duck insists on rest and takes the old man to the hotel. At this time, Levitz meets Masterton in a restaurant. He admits that he has the key to the sky and demands to allow his presence on the expedition and reminds him about the cane. The professor gives in, and Levitz announces that he will give the key inside the tomb of Princess Amanpour. In the morning, Duck finds Professor Mendel in very bad condition, and he insists that the guy replace him on the expedition. Meanwhile, Masterton's daughter, Sarah, arrives at the excavations, who first goes to the grave of her Egyptian mother. The girl remembers her songs about Princess Amanpour and promises to find out what happened to her. Later, the girl meets Dak, who says that he came instead of Professor Mendel. The girl really doesn't like this replacement. Dak goes to the professor's villa, where he is introduced to the Indian expert on ancient cultures, Rachit Singh, and the rest of the expedition members. Mendel's heart attack greatly upsets those present, but Sarah stands up for Doc because the guy has worked as an assistant to the professor for the past 4 years and knows much more than any historian they can find. Rachit has questions for Levitz since he is not a scientist, but Masterton cuts off the arguments since they are all necessary for the success of the expedition. In the morning, the expedition members arrive at the excavation site and are surprised by the presence of Egyptian soldiers there. Sarah tells Dak that her mother raised her alone, and this is the first expedition with her father. Here, representatives of the Egyptian authorities are trying to prevent the professor from entering the pyramid. Masterton declares that tomorrow he will be inside, no matter what it costs him. At night, Sarah goes to Dak's tent to discuss the upcoming adventure and suddenly says that she never loved her father. Her mother, an Egyptian by birth, died not far from this pyramid. The police said that the woman was attacked, robbed, and killed, but the girl does not believe that this is how it happened. Her mother was a strong and independent woman with a well-developed intuition. The man believes that Sarah is like her mother. Morning comes and the expedition members set off for the pyramid. The Egyptian authorities send 2 soldiers with them. Duck reads an ancient warning that those who enter will not return. The soldier breaks the wall, and the expedition enters the first chamber, inside which there are many wasp nests. Sarah accidentally steps on one of them, and the wasps begin to fly out. One of the soldiers is ordered to clear the way further, and he tries to break through the passage, but the insects attack him from all sides. Duck carries Sarah out of danger, while the second soldier, using a flamethrower, goes to help his comrade. But it is too late. The soldier did not survive, but still freed the passage. The group goes on. Claire senses danger and warns the others, but the professor cannot be stopped. After a while, the team enters a large hall, in the middle of which a golden figure stands on a stone pedestal. Levitz grabs it, and immediately the stone doors fall, killing the second soldier. Masterton orders Levitz to put the figurine back in place and not to touch anything else, and the rest to stand still. Rashid remembers the beliefs of the Egyptians. He counts the slabs on the floor and leads the team further. Something turns out to be wrong, and one of the slabs on the ceiling begins to move threateningly, but Rashid manages to freeze in place. Duck throws him his backpack. The Indian places it on the suspicious slab and avoids mortal danger. The group goes through the corridor and finds itself in a dead end, in the middle of which there is a sarcophagus. One of Levitz's guys returns in the hope of finding another way. Duck begins to study the sarcophagus. He tries to read the symbols and shines a flashlight into the holes. The light awakens the ancient mummy of the treasure guardian. At this time, Sarah asks Levitz about her mother. He says that the blood of an ancient princess flows in their veins, which is why Masterton needed them. Meanwhile, Duck and Rachit come to the conclusion that some kind of flying machine is depicted on the lid of the sarcophagus. At this moment, Claire says a phrase about a sleeper who will awaken and the earth will tremble under his feet. The professor understands that the sign of Osiris has risen. Duck finds a way to open the sarcophagus, inside which there is a path further. The people go down a low passage and find themselves in a decorated hall, which is the burial chamber of Princess Amanpour. Sarah confesses to Duck that Levitz considers her a direct descendant of the princess. The men remove the lid of the sarcophagus. While Rachit bows to the remains, Masterton throws the mummy on the floor because he did not come here for her bones at all. A keyhole appears at the bottom of the sarcophagus, and Masterton orders Levitz to give him the statuette. He admires the artifact that Hitler himself was looking for, and then puts it back in place. Immediately, the slabs begin to move and open a passage to the lower tiers, where there is a labyrinth with traps. Masterton goes first. Levitz follows and steps on a trapstone. After that, stone doors divide the group into parts. The professor becomes furious. Without Sarah, nothing will work, but the man orders them to go further. The second group of Rashid and two Egyptians go along the corridor and find a passage down. The man calls the professor, but the figure of the mummy that appears behind him throws the soldier down. At this time, Sarah, Duck, and Claire also find a hatch in the floor, go down into it and find a crashed soldier. Duck wonders for the first time what the seer is doing here, and the woman admits that she can transmit messages from Osiris. Suddenly, Rachit, who came out of a neighboring branch, attacks Duck, and the professor and Levitz appear from the third passage. The group reunites, moves on, and comes out into a huge hall filled with standing mummies, their heads pointing upwards. Rachit shows the differences in the bodies from the human structure. But suddenly, when one of the mummies attacks Sarah, the men open fire while the other mummies join the fight. Sarah finds the door and calls the others, but the bridge begins to slowly creep down, and people barely have time to get over it. Having lost the last Egyptian soldier, Sarah blames her father for her mother's death, but he is not going to stop. Masterton notices an iron door ahead. Duck, with Claire's help, reads the symbols on it, and the door suddenly begins to glow. The professor orders Sarah to go through the membrane because she is the key. The woman goes through the doors, and they disappear. The group heads into the passage and runs away from the mummy. The doors close, and everyone finds themselves in a huge underground laboratory filled with mysterious devices. The professor's assistant pushes Sarah into a stone chair and ties her up. Duck tries to help the woman, but stops in front of the gun barrel. Masterton sits down in the next chair and says that his daughter is a direct descendant of the princess, and her blood will reveal all the secrets of this place. Rachit tries to help Sarah, but a shot is heard, and the Indian falls into Duck's arms, and the professor's assistant cuts the girl's hand. Blood begins to flow down the gutter, while Masterton regrets that Sarah's mother did not want to cooperate, because otherwise she would have sat nearby and contemplated the beginning of a new era of humanity. Meanwhile, Sarah's blood gets into a special bowl and activates ancient devices, from which luminous streams fly out onto the rows of mummies. The pyramid opens. A powerful beam hits the sky. Duck rushes to Sarah to free her, but the girl snatches a gun from his pocket and shoots her father. The professor dies. The process goes in the opposite direction, and the pyramid begins to collapse. The survivors run away from it. Duck grabs Sarah and drags her to a hole in the wall. The lost Professor Mendel sees Claire, Sarah, and Duck. Sarah thanks Duck for saving her life and kisses him. Claire points to the sky and says that they are waiting for the time when they can return.